What happens when we are born and we come in? We're actually just consciousness. We don't have the ability, the skills, and the training to have a language or know what anything is. So everything is just an appearance. We're not identifying with it because it's all the same. Our mental activity hasn't really started in terms of an egoic structure. So all the things that we see, we might be conscious, we're conscious of, there's an awareness, there's a wondering, but labeling hasn't started. And then at some early age, I guess 1 or before 1, because of our conditioning or training, we, as Padmasambhava is saying, some of our first identifications are with mom, dad, sister, brother. The early identification is, this is a thing that's separate, and it has a name. And so that is the label for this thing. And as we grow, we attach all of the words or the labels to the objects that are appearing before us. And we create duality that way. This is that. And then we start off really not in sentences. We just start off with labels. As a child, if you watch a baby, they're just going to look at something and say flower. They're not going to talk about it. The early identification is with labels. And that's how it becomes a pattern. And we start to bring language in, and then after language comes in, we conceptualize, meaning we make choices on what we like, what we don't like, what our opinions are. We become fixed in opinions, and we become clear, or egoically clear, about what we want or don't want, what makes us happy and doesn't make us happy. And once that cognition comes in of experiencing duality, labeling objects, and then deciding what's going to make us happy or what we like and don't like, craving comes in. And that is the kind of the structure, the foundation of the ego. As we get older, language just becomes habitual, as does opinions. And our view, which is, there's as many views as there's people on the planet, because our view is also altered by our own conditioning. So trauma alters our opinions and our views, as does happy experiences and blissful experiences. And so our views aren't going to match. One person may love this beautiful bouquet. Another person may feel aversion and say, I'm allergic to this. So it's not the same for everyone. We're all experiencing different views within the samsaric world. And in this morning's transmission, Padmasambhava is referring to the 6 different views in samsara. If we leave samsara and go into ground consciousness, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, or Nirmanakaya, as he says, those poisonous emotions are gone. We're no longer within the 6 views of samsara. There's not pride, there's not jealousy, there's not anger, there's not desire. So it's broken down not only through Padmasambhava, but Buddha Shakyamuni and many of the masters in Tibetan Buddhism. And this is quite literally the science of the mind, how the mind is working. Our worldly concerns are attached, connected with these 6 views. And the 6 views are broken up, and they're actually displayed in the altar here. We start with the kind of God view, which is a lot of abundance and bliss. And it's characterized by attachment to bliss. And we've all probably experienced this. And then under that is the demigod view, which is the view of somewhat jealousy, somewhat fighting because of competition, acquiring abundance again, and then trying to keep what we have. So it's characterized by jealousy and other emotions like that. And then we have the human realm, which is characterized by desire. And much of our human existence is spent desiring, going after things that we've labeled and made opinions about and judgments about, and decided that we are an independent self that wants ownership of this thing, whatever this thing is. Of course, in Dharmakaya, there is no ownership. There's no self. And then under the human is the animal, which is characterized by actually stupidity, because there is no self-awareness. And under that is the hungry ghost, which is characterized by miserliness, greed, emotions related to that level of lack. And then under that is the hell realm, which is characterized by anger, rage, war. And what Padmasambhava in Tibetan Buddhism is saying is that if we look at our lives, if we look at our emotions, we're actually kind of going through all 6 of them at different times in our lives. Because our condition, our human condition, is characterized often by the emotions that we feel, samsara, pride, jealousy, lack, greed. And as these emotions rise in us and we get pulled into feeling we are that emotion, or we're relating to that emotion, identifying with the label of that emotion, we are then in that realm. Anger creates hell, creates war. And all the other realms are the same. Whatever the emotion is that we're experiencing is the realm that we're in. So in Buddhism and all traditions really, there is the understanding or the pursuit of understanding how the mind works so we can see this for ourselves because it's all ours. There's really nothing happening outside of us. It's our mind. And then we can leave samsara because we can gain mastery over these emotions which are creating these realms of suffering. And the Four Noble Truths gets into this very much, because the Four Noble Truths are about understanding the realization that the samsaric world is a world of suffering. That's the first Noble Truth. And then the second Noble Truth is understanding the cause of this suffering, the self, desire, craving. And then third Noble Truth is the understanding that there is the ability to cease suffering. And then the fourth Noble Truth is there is a path that you can walk in many traditions, not just Tibetan Buddhism, where you will have the ability to have the cessation of suffering. You end suffering, and you end suffering by leaving samsara, mastering the mind, and you carry yourself and clear the obscurations, which again gets back to the foundation of labeling. And in that clearing, you realize Dharmakaya, heaven, purity, the absence of disturbing emotions. And this is also practiced in Tibetan Buddhism, as well as Hindu, Advaita, mystical Christianity. Every tradition has its version of this. Getting back to the question though, can we speak more to labeling as habits? At the point that we're an adult or even a teenager, we're not even aware that we're labeling anymore, because it's on autopilot at that point. We don't even experience appearances as like what Buddhists would call one taste. I've heard Sharon talk about this a lot too. We just focus in on something, and it's an object, and it's a thing. And we're not even in we've gone past the labeling. The labeling takes a split second. We're not even aware of it. We go right to our conception of it, whether it's going to make us happy or not, and whether we should crave it and pursue it. So what Padmasambhava is saying is the label is at the root. If we show up and look at anything, really, the appearances in our environment, and don't label it, we're just looking at it. We're just experiencing it. We cease labeling it. That cuts the root of samsara because it cuts the root of thought. Thought can only build on things that we label. If you cut labeling, you actually cut the thought itself. And the cessation of the thought and the thinking, again, brings us back into ground consciousness, reveals ground consciousness. Because our attention is no longer distracted in all the things that we think we're doing or not doing. Labeling is also, as I think we all are very aware, extremely habitual. So habitual we actually aren't even aware of it. After, as even young adults and adults, we don't even think about it. A lot of what the instruction was this morning is in the form of transmission to actually give the experience of what the words are saying. But it's also a practice. And Tibetan Buddhists do this practice. You're in your meditation, and particularly in post-meditation when you're back out, we're all back out in our outer environments. We're looking at things and we're not labeling. And we actually all have the ability to not label because we started that way. So it's in us. We could show up in our lives without labeling. And it's a very interesting practice because the mind's going to have all kinds of things to say about this practice. Like, well, you can't do this because if you don't label and you're not thinking in the same way and you don't have judgments, your life will fall apart. But it doesn't fall apart. And what Padmasambhava is saying, and so many, and Trungpa Rinpoche said it also, and Advaita teachers talk about this quite often also, non-dual teachers, I've heard Sharon talk about this, Jennifer. To actually do the practice is the finding out of what happens. And what actually happens is the entrance into awakened mind.